Founders, welcome back to the 0 to 5,000 podcast, where we obsess over the convergence of human potential and business results. Today, our hosts Drew McClure and Jordan Mitchell have another insightful conversation for you. So let's jump right in.
Okay, founders, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are joined by Roger Knecht. Roger is the president of Universal Accounting Center, a post-secondary school for accounting professionals. Roger is the author of Your Strategic Accountant and Your Profit and Growth Expert, each written to help business owners understand what they can expect from the accounting profession, and host of Building the Premier Accounting Firm. And today, to tell us all about his experience, is Roger himself. So Roger, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Excited to be here. This is going to be a good conversation.
Yes, sir. I mean, this is something that I, over the years as a business owner, have failed to really take full advantage of.
All right.
And over the past few years have gotten a great accountant and have started to see the benefits of having someone like that in your corner. So I want to get to know you a little bit better. How did you get into the accounting world?
Interesting. So this is more than 25 years ago. I was actually working as a headhunter, a recruiter. I was placing individuals in temporary or permanent type positions, became familiar with Universal Accounting Center through that as I was taking their graduates and placing them on assignments. They did very well, and I had my clients coming back asking for more of those types of individuals. And so I started to become more and more acquainted with the school and found an opportunity to find position with Universal Accounting. So my background isn't technically accounting.
Okay.
I graduated in communications and did a lot with sales, film, just a totally different industry. And through that was actually able to be introduced to the accounting profession. And there goes 25 years of my life after that.
Wow. Okay. So you were first doing headhunting, came across this school, and then what did it look like for you to get involved beyond that?
Initially, it was consultative. I was helping them with a variety of things, some related to the state of Utah as it related to bringing in students, giving them training and so forth. But it was through that interaction, I got to know the president of the company at the time, some of the key individuals, and through that consultative work was given an opportunity to be employed. And so I came on, started employment. That was in 1999.
Okay. And then that's quite a journey going from consultant to employee to president. What did that look like going from employee to president? How many years? And then what was that path like for you?
A lot of heartache. First of all, it was a family business, and I'm not family. So that was something that you have to get through. But as it related to the business, yeah, I came in. We started a number of different divisions within the organization. So there were 2, 3, 4 that I was able to initiate and start and grow. And then as we later grew the business, some of those had to be closed as divisions of the company as we evolved. And then the second president of the company, the son of the founder, he was ready for retirement. He got to the point where he felt it was necessary for him to move on. And so he was trying to identify who would take the reins after that. And through some process, which he's not really been too transparent as to how he identified me, but nonetheless, he singled me out and said I would be getting the reins. And from there, I took them more than 10 years ago.
Wow. Okay. And what's the experience been like for you taking over a family business like that, having the pressure that comes with a legacy and even just the normal responsibilities of being a president of an organization?
You know, I appreciate the question because it was fascinating to me. Clearly, I was sensitive to what the company had been. I had been a part of it, so I'd experienced it. And so for me to become president of the organization, I was being tested by some of those that were my peers at the time. What could they get away with? What was I going to be like as president? How was I going to be different? But one of the things that the previous president shared with me is, here are some words of advice. And one of the things that he shared with me are sacred cows, things that I couldn't change. But more importantly, he gave me the go-ahead, the permission, if you will, to actually put my own fingerprint on the company, be the one with the vision, give it direction. And it took me about a year plus to figure out what that really meant to me, how I was going to lead the business, how I was going to pay attention to the market and evolve. And yet I found my footing and over time created the business. And now when I meet with him, he can look at the company and in 10 years, it doesn't resemble what it was. And so we've clearly evolved from what it was initially. And so that's, I guess, good. That's good news. It means I'm doing something. Yeah. I'm doing more than what he expected. So that's nice.
Did you have anything in particular, people or exercises or things you did in that first year that helped you get some of that clarity you were looking for on your vision or your fingerprints?
Yes, there were a number of things. One of the things that he advised, and I really am appreciative of it, is he said to go and attend conferences. And it was there that I was able to interact with our customers, get to know not only who they were, but more importantly, who the movers and shakers were in the industry. And as I paid attention to what was happening in the industry, listened to how we could maybe fill some of the voids, it became clear how we were going to more or less be present in the industry, how we were going to show up and represent and be more or less a moving force in the industry. So for accounting professionals, I became very comfortable saying, okay, this is how we're going to distinguish ourselves and be a unique training institution. And that was, I think, one of the more sound pieces of advice. The second thing is trusting the numbers. I'm
Mm.
not an accountant by trade, clearly working for the business at that point for about 15 years. I became very, very comfortable with and familiar with the accounting model and looking at the numbers. But the advice of just trusting the numbers became very, very helpful because as president, I started to feel anxieties, feelings, emotions that I perhaps didn't really recognize previously. But these emotions were clouding my judgment. If I just trusted the numbers, I found that I could run the business more intelligently. And so I
Mm.
started to lean more into the numbers and let them be my guide. And it's interesting. There's the adage of the accounting is the language of business, and it truly is. That's how the company is speaking to you. And if you just listen to what it has to say, it'll give you some great advice of do this, don't do this, do more of this. And it's very, very important to listen to.
Do you have any, and this may be a tough example, you've been in business for so long, but do any examples come to mind that would flesh that out for us where you're feeling a certain kind of way about maybe the direction of the business or how things are going, but when you looked at the numbers that changed your opinion?
Yeah, there's a few that come to mind. I mentioned earlier that I shut down a number of divisions in the company, one of which was a division that we had that was called Road. It was where we actually went and on the road would go to various metropolitans and do seminars. And in that travel, we had people that we referred to as presenters that would go on the road about 40 plus weekends a year, and they would travel and do back of the room sales. And in that department, it was very clear that we were passionate about what we did because it was a great way to reach out, meet the customers that we had. It gave us a face-to-face interaction. But financially, it was becoming far and far more difficult to be profitable. It became more costly to travel. It became more costly to advertise. The margins were becoming much more thin in that division. And it just became very apparent that as we went from 6 presenters down to fewer, once we got down to the last one, we just realized once that individual goes, we just can't sustain this. And as
Mm.
enjoyable as it was to travel, as nice as it was to go on the road and meet the people, there was still a financial component to it, and we just couldn't financially justify it anymore. So at that point, that division was shut down, and it was just the reality of the situation. You just couldn't justify it. Emotionally, it was hard, but numbers wise, it made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember hearing, and I read part of the book. I didn't read all of it, but I remember hearing Dr. Henry Cloud at a conference. Are you familiar with Dr. Henry Cloud?
No.
He is I guess you'd say like an organizational psychologist, and he works with a number of CEOs and founders. And he said what he found was often the most difficult but most important decisions that a CEO would make is what he called necessary endings.
Hmm.
And that would be one of them, where for a number of reasons, something, a product line, a service, a thing that used to make sense that doesn't make sense anymore is actually taking away resources from the business.
Hmm.
And he would often have to help them overcome some of those emotional or nostalgic or for whatever reason, like kind of sacred cow you even mentioned, feeling towards something to say, hey, if we really look at this needs to be a necessary ending and free up those resources to other parts of the organization. Is that kind of what that was?
It was, and I appreciate you sharing that because I've never heard that before, but it's still something I bring up with my clients all the time. And what I mean by that is when a business starts, it's typical that they have a product or a service that is kind of like their flagship thing. It's what they started with, they originated with, it's what customers maybe know them for, it's how they really got established in the market. Well, after a business has been around for a period of time, the industry, the market changes, and it's not uncommon for that product to no longer be the most profitable thing that they have on the revenue. And so, if you look at that line of, or excuse me, that list of services or products that the company is providing, it's possible that that thing is no longer the most profitable product. And because of that, the business owner is reluctant to let it go, or
Yep.
more or less reallocate funds or advertising dollars and such. And so, as the accounting professional, the business coach coming in, what you find is that they're easy to point out, and it's very obvious that the change needs to be made, but there's an emotional connection to it. And for some, they're willing to say, well, no, it's something we're going to hold on to. It's what we're known for, and so that's what we're going to kind of just be known as. But for others, it's like, well, clearly I could be much more effective and profitable for the company if I just pivot here. And it's just getting the courage to now pivot, find that opportunity to let go of what it was that you used to do and now move on. And there's numerous examples of this in the marketplace. Clearly, as a company, I've evolved. Back in the early 70s and 80s, and even into the 90s, we were a traditional school with classroom environments. We closed down our classrooms more than a decade ago. We're now an
Wow.
independent studies campus where you actually go online to do all the training. So, although a school, we don't have campuses anymore. We closed 22 of our locations, and that was the end of it.
Wow. Yeah. You always see key pivots, and sometimes it's not just pivots, it's evolutions.
Mhm.
Like that sounds more like an evolution than a pivot, right? What you mentioned earlier, sometimes working with businesses, is that something that you just do personally, or does the school also have a part of it that is working directly with businesses, not just training accountants?
We have a division of our company called Universal Business Builders. It's where we offer business coaching services. And so, yes, I do work with clients and they are business owners, and I do business coaching with them.
Cool. Very cool. So is the core service still though the school for people in accounting? And what is the, like when you said looking at the industry, finding what the primary value add is, what did you find it was, and has that changed today, 10 years later?
It evolves slightly, but we are at the root of everything a post secondary school for accounting professionals. And as such, we provide training, certifications, coaching, and support to people that are either starting or building their accounting, bookkeeping, or tax business. We're essentially working with the owners or training them and their staff. So the whole goal is to build what I refer to as the premier accounting firm, offering quality services and getting the owner paid what they're worth.
Gotcha. Okay, so they've got the technical skills. They've learned accounting in a sense. They maybe have an accounting degree, but they don't actually know how to build accounting business. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so you can go to the schools and become, say, a degreed accountant, book, your bachelor's, master's degree as an accounting professional, become a CPA. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you're an accountrepreneur. And that's a term I use. Accountrepreneur means that you have that entrepreneurial drive, that business mindset, because there's a difference between doing accounting and running a business.
Sure.
But for an accounting professional, it's the merging of those two for them to have a successful accounting business. And so I do work with people that are accountants. They're very good at what they do, but they don't have that business mindset of marketing, selling, pricing, client retention, and onboarding, all those types of things that are essential for them to be successful. But they are great accountants. On the flip side, I work with a number of individuals that are great from an entrepreneurial point of view, many of whom never got formally trained in accounting. Technically, they aren't the traditional accountant as it relates to I got a bachelor's degree in accounting, master's degree in accounting, but yet as an entrepreneur, they see an opportunity in the industry to offer accounting services. And so for them, they go out and start their accounting business, and we're assisting them in getting what they need to offer those services effectively.
Are there one or two of those things that you find a trend, and it's okay if it's not this way, but is there one or two of those that the accounting person has a harder time grasping, becoming an entrepreneur, like thinking like a salesperson or marketing or something like that, that's just low hanging fruit that once they get it, it's so much easier for them?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the sales. Sales is very difficult. Generally, people, and being very stereotypical
Yeah,
here,
I
but
asked you a
nonetheless,
generalized question.
yeah. So I'll just be broad. Many people that are gravitated towards the accounting profession are more numbers based rather than people's based. They like the fact that it's absolute, that I can go sit in a corner and work on numbers and just come up with a very simple answer or an answer. And in the people sphere, the soft skills is something that they may not have thrived in or really done a lot of studies in. And so for that accounting professional to go out and start a business, honestly, in the 4 or 6 year degree that they have, they've had zero classes as it relates to marketing, selling, client relationships, client retention, but all those are essential for their success. And so they went into the profession presuming that they're going to go work in a large company, be in a department, run the numbers, and now they find themselves having to go out and network and market and sell and come up with their unique selling proposition, figure out how to price their service. How do you onboard a client? How do you retain a client? All of which weren't necessary just going into an accounting department being hired to take on a role. Now they're doing all of that. And that's something that is very uncomfortable for a lot of them. And for them to find a way to do it comfortably is very important. So that's
Yeah.
how we kind of step into that place.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that was the same learning curve for me. is when I started, I still do executive coaching, business coaching, that type of thing. I was very familiar with the actual service itself.
Hmm.
I had no clue how to go out and find a customer. I
Yeah.
had no clue how to do a discovery call. I did
Yep.
not know how to even present the value of what we were doing and therefore justify the investment that this person would be making. And that surprised me, but once you step back, you're like, well, that makes sense. Like if you're a baker, that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to run a bakery,
Yep.
right? If I know how to
Yep.
fix cars, that doesn't mean that I know how to run a auto mechanic shop, right?
That's
And
right.
so
That's right.
that sounds very similar, not just to accountants, but to anyone who's got a trade or a specific skill set that is now going to make a business of it versus being hired for it, right?
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're just kind of summarizing what Gerber expresses in E-Myth. It's this whole
E-Myth. Yep.
idea of you're starting a business because you're a technician. You have a skill, you have an ability, and you think you can now monetize it and run a business. And you quickly realize there's a lot to running a business more than just the skill itself. And so, yeah, it's quickly realized. And I think as an accountrepreneur, that mindset of merging the accounting services, that skill with the mindset of an entrepreneur, those two, as they become much more ingrained and natural, that is more akin to being successful.
Yeah. For you, when you took over, yes, you took over a business that already existed, but everybody that's running a business is an entrepreneur. They're having to keep innovating, stepping into the unknown, building new things. What was the biggest learning curve for you in the first few years?
There were quite a few, actually. Um, the one thing that I really struggled with, and I still sometimes have difficulty with, is I was very passionate about the business. I love what we do. I'm very excited about it. It's something that I really see making differences in people's lives. But so often I find I employ individuals that have jobs. You just try to work with people and get them motivated and excited. What ideas do they have to improve and make things better? And they just stare at you aimlessly. I'm just here for the paycheck. You contracted with me from 9 to 5. I'm here. What do you want me to do? And that's just so frustrating to me to work with individuals that have that mindset. And yet they exist. And so it's trying to take that person and help them realize, no, you have a place here. You have a voice here. You have a contribution to make. We need you. We're dependent upon you. We want you to stick around. And it's taking that person from that job mentality over to, you've got a place. You have something that you contribute to here that we really appreciate. And it doesn't always work that way. Some of these people
Sure.
just aren't, um, they don't care. They're just in it for the paycheck. And unfortunately, it's important to manage them. It's important to help them understand what's expected. It's important to help them be effective. But at the end of the day, it's just working with some people that are just indifferent. And so that was a challenge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned something that I tell every client we work with. We'll come in and work with, let's say, 10 to 20 leaders in an organization. I say, hey, man, I can be the best person you've ever hired. There's no guarantee that every person is going to make any changes, right? Because I can't force someone to actually do something different or see something different. But there will be those that do, that are ready, willing, and make some shifts that'll blow your mind. And so the same is true for you in this example, where my question is going is, yeah, there's still going to be people that no matter what you tried, no matter how you encourage them to contribute or think differently or offer their creativity to the job, still don't. But for those that did, what were some of those approaches that helped kind of bring someone out of that just 9 to 5 mentality and maybe take a chance or get more invested in kind of the creativity and the passion for what you're doing?
I'm going to say it's three things. The first is clear expectations. The more
Mm,
obvious it is what it is they need to do, the more likely they'll be able to focus and do what you're expecting. So,
yeah,
clear expectations. So, I refer to that as key metrics, key performance indicators. So, does every person understand what is expected? And as long as they know that, they're able to then successfully do what's expected, and it's a win win. So, I think that's where I start. The second thing that I do is then also emphasize how essential what it is they're doing to the entire business model, that they're playing an essential role, that they contribute, that they matter. And all of a sudden, I think that is that glimmer of hope that they're
yeah,
actually going to start appreciating, you know what, maybe I make a difference here. Maybe this is someplace where I belong because I do contribute. And if I can break through and help them realize that I do care about what they have to say and what they're doing, and that it matters how they're actually working in the organization, how they take care of the customers and so forth, that then could actually switch that from a job to an opportunity for them to excel. And so that's where I think that pivot may occur. But the
Yeah.
third thing that I'd point out there is recognizing that they perhaps can do the job better than I can, that they can maybe make a difference more so than I would. And if I can help them realize that I appreciate what they're doing to the point that I care about their input, their suggestions, their ideas, then I'm willing to invest in them and send them to trainings and conferences that I can't attend. And yet they're able to come back with new ideas of how they can make things different or better. It's that enthusiasm, that excitement that they're eventually, hopefully, going to bring to the company that I'm wanting to eventually tap into. And if I can get them to be excited, then I think we're where we're needing to be, to where they're now the advocate. They're the ones that are passionate.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
I love that. Yeah. So clarity, key. Again, Henry Cloud, same guy. I remember he said, the mist in a leader's mind is the cloud in the organization. So he's like, if it's even a little misty in your mind, what that role is, what they're doing, it's going to be a giant cloud to them. They're not going to know what
Yes.
they're doing. So
Yes.
clarity gives them the ability to even contribute. Second thing you mentioned is value. Like, can I see the dots that what I'm doing is a part of this greater thing? So if there's a sense of intrinsic value for my efforts here. And then the third is belief, which is really cool, that this, whether it's you they're working with directly or maybe their manager or team leader, that someone is pouring belief into them. Is that what that third one is?
It is, but at the same time, I'm looking for them to be a contributor. I'm looking to give them voice. I'm wanting them to feel as if that what they have to say matters. That's where I think the click changes from being in a job to now being a contributor, that they're actually no longer just showing up at the start of the day and then leaving and mentally checking out. They're
Yeah.
actually thinking about the business in the middle of the night, and they're coming into the office with a suggestion or an idea. That's what I'm looking for. I'm wanting to have somebody that is not just reacting to what I have to say. I'm wanting them to come up with the ideas that are ahead of me, that they've got things that they're excited to work on. I can come up with ideas all day long. That's what I'm notorious for. I can come up with things that need to take place in the business faster than my employees can implement them. And
Yeah.
so I'm always pushing my people, and I like working with somebody who can eventually not necessarily push me, but get ahead of where I see the company going in a certain area. They're like, no, 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 this needs to happen next. We need this now. And they start bringing things to the table that I hadn't even considered. That's exciting to me.
That is cool. You know what makes me think of when working with we were working with a software in a company called Predictive Index that works with helping employee engagement and that type of thing. And so I was going down that rabbit trail of learning research about employee engagement. One of the things that was interesting is they said, if you're going to, like, let's say, give a survey, like basically invite the voice of people to give input on something,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't do anything about what they say, you are better off not asking for the input in the first place. Because they said there's this discouragement that happens where you've started a conversation like, we want your ideas or we want your feedback. And then you think you've done your job because you asked a question. But if they've given you answers and over the course of 6 months or a year, nothing is done about it, right? Or addressed or considered, then they feel even more powerless than they did before you even asked the question. And so it was a really cool, I guess, conversation point of like, hey, once you invite feedback, what do we do with it? There'll be some things that we'll want to consider and some things that, thank you for your feedback, but that's not the direction we're going to go. But either way, there's like a vulnerable or like really important space right there once you've done the work of inviting someone to bring their ideas. Are there subtle things that we do or can do to make that a positive thing versus like, yeah, I shared my idea, but you shut it down or you reacted in a way that I don't want to contribute anymore?
So you bring up something interesting here, and it is something I have experience with. So you're right. You go to your employees, you put out a survey, you have a meeting, you solicit their input, and they start offering things. What's interesting to me is I sometimes do exactly like you just suggested. I shut it down, and here's the reason why. I unfortunately, having been doing this business for 25 years, have seen and done a lot of what these employees are suggesting. Why don't we do it this way? We did that 10
Tried
years
it.
ago. It did not work.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm trying to just answer here is, even with that experience, it's how I go about now answering that.
Yeah.
I do want them to know I appreciate their input. I do want them to know that I value their perspective. However, as the leader of the organization, how do I take and address been there, done that, and not turn off that creativity? How do I address that is a good idea, but I don't think you're realizing the repercussions that that may have in the rest of the company if we were to implement that here, how that would trickle through the organization, how
Yeah.
that could actually ultimately affect the, let's say, the customer's experience down the line. And I might have a vision or a perspective that's broader than what that idea is. So the point is great suggestion. I appreciate the participation, but how do I now not necessarily shut down, but address good idea. However, here's what we've learned, and here's how we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So those are two things. But I'm going to end on a third. Sometimes it's worth me saying, yeah, I did it 10 years ago, but why not try it again now? Why don't I just go ahead and obviously you're more passionate about this than I am or was. Maybe
Yeah.
you can pull it off where before I couldn't. So if you feel that this is where it needs to go, what are you willing to do about it? What are you willing to do to make it happen? And I have to be humble enough, yes, humble enough as the leader to say, maybe you're the right person to make this change where before I couldn't. So that's the third thing I'd like to end
I
on.
like that.
Even though I've got all this experience, maybe I just need to step back and say, okay, let's give it another try and let them feel like I'm trusting them. Let them feel like I'm willing to give it another shot. Because at the end of the day, maybe now is the right time for it where before it wasn't.
I love that. Yeah, I really love that, being open to maybe things are different. Maybe it's a different person. Maybe the landscape has changed in some way where this would work. Is it kind of a, and it'd be, I guess it'd be different in every situation, but it'd be
Mm-hmm.
kind of a beta test. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we don't have to, like, go full sail on this, but I can encourage it enough to say, could we try a small test that this person runs and go see if we can get any data that validates that this would be a direction we really want to double down on, right?
And what's the harm in saying that you've done it a second time and proven the same outcome? I mean, that's kind of like the scientific test right there. You
Right.
know the outcome and you're going to test, does it come out the same way? Well, okay, I have a belief that it's going to come out a certain way. Do it again. Oh my heavens, it came out the same way. My point is now validated. So
Yeah.
nothing, no wrong in being proven right.
Yeah. And they got to go learn that lesson themselves and feel
Mm-hmm.
like their idea was validated and, okay, you're right. That it didn't
Yeah.
work. And we can just redirect it then. Like, what you're liking is that they're contributing. Right.
Yeah,
And so
that's exactly right.
even if the idea was wrong, well, cool, we learned from it. Let's keep engaging and let's keep looking at the thing we were trying to solve. And we thought it was this, it wasn't this. So let's go find what it could be. Right.
And realize if I know the outcome, I could tell them what the outcome will be because of my experience, but they may not appreciate what I'm saying. But when they go through the experience and they come to the same conclusion, they're going to appreciate the same outcome because they experienced it differently than if I just told them and avoided the whole situation. So
Yeah.
it's going to be to their benefit that I trusted them. They went through it, they learned it. So yeah, there's value in letting them just go through the process in certain situations.
Exactly. And so that, I mean, what I'm literally thinking about is I experience this almost every day as a father of three kids, mainly with my son. He is always running ideas by me, or not running them by me. Sometimes I'll just be out there and see an idea him and his friends are trying to do and go, wait a second, that's not going to end well. Right. And I have to pick and choose which ones are a safe enough thing for him to try and fail and it not end up in the hospital. And this literally happened yesterday. We have a small little bike ramp that it's a very sturdy, it's an actual bike ramp that they jump their bikes on. And then
Yeah,
this other
good.
kid went and got a plywood sheet and wanted to lay it on top of this ramp. And I was like, guys, that's not going to work. I was sitting out there with him and they're like, why? It fits. I was like, the moment you go off center, that little box is in the middle and the big wide plywood's inside, it's going to tip and your bike and you are going to go flying. And they were in the cul-de-sac and they kept arguing with me. And I said, I'll let you do it if you do it in our grass. And they were like, fine. And so they went over there in the grass. They set it up. And sure enough, the third time a kid goes off, the plywood flips and he goes tumbling on the side. But he learned in the grass. It was like not a big deal, not even a skinned knee, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think as business owners, it's evaluating like, hey, if we do this test, if we let someone run with this, what are the consequences if it fails? Is it massive that really hurts them, hurts us? Or is it something we can stomach? Like, didn't take up a ton of resources, didn't have a huge impact on the customer, and we learned the lesson. Does that make sense? Like, I see it not just in business, but in everyday life.
It does. And I'm going to add one more thing to it. Beautiful example, by the way. The thing I'd add is no longer am I the one having to make the case that this is the thing we don't do. That
Yeah.
individual who now ran that same test is going to be that proponent that says, no, we tried that. It
We
doesn't work.
tried it.
It's not me anymore. They're now saying to the masses, you know
Yep.
what? We've already done it. I did it, and it didn't work. That person can now make that claim rather than me all the time. So, yeah, letting them go through that experience and now letting them become the advocate, the proponent, the voice. That's important to have somebody like that in the organization that can now testify to the same thing I've already learned before.
Yeah. And man, when the things go well too, now you've got someone ignited in their confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's say they run a test and it goes well and they're like, I did that. I came up with that idea. I put the team together. I ran
Yep.
the test and it worked. You've now got another person on your team that is feeling confident and empowered and innovative. And that has a trickle effect as well.
Exactly. Yep. Both for the good and for the bad. So I like it.
Absolutely. Super cool. For the business owner listening, since you have a service in which you're actually working directly with entrepreneurs and small business, maybe even large businesses, but we often on the show have small to medium sized business owners listening here. Is there anything you find in common that when you first start working with them is an obvious thing they weren't doing before that they could start doing now that would be worth throwing out to our audience from an
I've
accounting
got a
perspective?
few. I've got a few.
Yeah.
The first thing is KPIs. That's one of the things that I start with. I'm very passionate about leading and lagging indicators. When you're running the business, what are the numbers that you watch that when the certain leading indicators are in play, the lagging ones can be expected. So those are very important. I always identify with the company no more than 3 to 5 key indicators that we're watching, one principal one with some supporting ones. The second thing is understanding accounting. Clearly, we're accounting based, and so very quickly, about the second or third month of the engagement, we'll take the financials, push across the income statement, and I'll ask the owner of the business, "What do you look at when you see this?" And it ranges from I have no idea what I'm looking at. I just look at the bottom line. If it's positive, I'm happy. I have no clue otherwise. Others will say, no, I look at this and I see these relations. I'm curious what they use that information for and how they look at it. And then what I'm trying to do over the next few months is educate them as to the value of that income statement, both cash and accrual, why it matters, how to make business decisions using that information, how to actually take month over month comparisons and use that to make a decision moving forward, forecasting, how to take quarter over quarter analysis, year to date over previous year to date comparisons, and actually see how the company is evolving, see the various ratios as they are, perhaps gross profit to let's say payroll, gross profit to maybe say advertising. What are those relationships to see, are they actually getting better, getting worse, holding their own? So there's a lot to be said about those numbers, but then the same is true for the balance sheet. Push that across the table. What do you look at here? What matters to you? What are you looking for? And it ranges from I have no idea what I'm looking at to no, this is how I look at this correlation. I want to know what my current ratio is as it relates to my assets and my liabilities. Okay, these are great things. EBITDA, I look at EBITDA. Well, when I know what the client is familiar with already, I can build from that. We can now start having conversations about the organization and what they're ultimately building, because in reality, it's an asset. What the company is something that will eventually be sold. You will die, and the company theoretically can outlive you, period. So, what are you building that will extend beyond you? What is your legacy? And I don't care if it's going to be handed down to employees, to a family member, off to another company that you're going to sell. I don't care if you're selling it in a year or in 5 years or 20 years from now. The point is it will outlast you if you build it correctly. And just like your home, just like any other asset, if you build it correctly, it'll be around for a while. And I'd like that to be a legacy they can be proud of. So that's what we're trying to build. So yes, key performance indicators, very important. Then understanding the financials. That's how the company's communicating to the owner. And as the accounting professional, we need to be acting as an interpreter, a translator. You
Right.
don't have to know that language. The language of business is accounting. Well, think of it like a foreign language that you're not familiar with. There's the business is speaking in Spanish. You don't
Yeah.
speak Spanish. There's a few terms that's great. You need to bring in a translator and say, look, my company's talking to me in Spanish. I don't know Spanish. What's it saying to me? That's the role of the accounting professional. Now the business owner has a relationship with its business that can be functional and effective because they're communicating more effectively. And that's important.
Man, it makes sense. My dad, he ran a commercial roofing business for like 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got into business for myself, he and I were chatting one day and I said, similar to this podcast, just ask him questions like, hey, what's some of those important decisions you ever made? And the first thing that came to mind, the very first thing was there are 3 people that are worth their weight in gold that whatever they charged, I paid, no questions asked. And I was like, wow, who are those 3 people? And he said, my accountant, my lawyer, and my financial manager. And I was like, really? And he said, man, there's some things you look for the cheapest out there. There's some things that you're trying to find, value on the position. He's like, when I found the right accountant, I found the right lawyer, and I found the right person to manage my money, my financial wealth. He said, I paid them whatever they asked, because whatever they gave me back was always more than that. And so just like you're talking about, he's like, I don't know how to speak that language. I don't know, but I found the right person who did. And it was such a comfort to him to be able to interpret what was going on, to make decisions for the future, to know that things were buttoned up and moving in the right direction was of immense value. And so that's why I told you at the beginning of this, I'm very excited that you're on this podcast for that reason. When you talk about KPIs, that is something that we could wrap our minds around as business owners, maybe a little bit easier than me grilling you on the balance sheet and the terms you just used.
Yeah.
For the business owner, let's talk about the lead indicators and lag indicators. What do you mean when you say that?
So I'll just give an example, and we'll see if it resonates with your audience. So in an organization, you probably have a sales funnel. And if you're trying to make money, if you know what your cost of sale is, and you know what your lifetime value of the customer is, and your average invoice is for your customer, let's say you're Costco, and you know that the average person coming through with a shopping cart is going to spend $200, and every shopping cart on average is $200. Well, how do you get more shopping carts to come through the line, right? How do you get people to come through that front door to get in the store to come buy? Well, what we're trying to do then is just go to the very beginning and say, okay, as an organization, you're spending time at the marketing level to get your message out there, advertising, networking events, whatever the case may be. And you need to know as an organization, where does your funnel start? Where does the customer first make contact with your organization to realize that you may be a solution to their need? That right there, that first contact, I want to know how many of those do you need? Because if we know that 10% of the people you contact buy, well, if I need 10 sales, I need 100 contacts.
Yeah.
That's a leading indicator, because at the end of the day, I need to know how close am I to the 100? Because do I need 100 a day, 100 a week? Well, if it's Wednesday and I'm right in the middle of the week, I better be around 50 leads coming in my system. If I don't have 50 towards the 100 I need, why am I surprised I don't have 10 sales at the end of the week?
Right.
There shouldn't be any confusion. If I don't have 100 leads, I don't have 10 sales. There's no confusion there. Now, from the 10 sales, I know if I make 10 sales, just because my average revenue is $200 from the sale, I know theoretically I've got $2,000 in revenue that came in. But if it's off, I know that something's awry with the shopping cart scenario. Somebody's not putting stuff in their cart. So I can figure out where things are breaking down long before the accounting information is put on the table and said, here's your P&L and whether or not you made money. I need to know what those leading indicators are that I should be watching. And that's where I should be putting my attention. It's not down the funnel where the customer's in the store and leaving and so forth. I want to know, go to the very front of the store and say, okay, how do I get 10 more people in? That's where you're putting those blow up dolls that are flipping around in the air. And that's where you're putting people out twirling on the corner. That's where you're doing radio ads, television. What is it that works that draws in people? Well, when you get at the front of the store and say, hey, thanks for coming. By the way, how did you know we were here? And they tell you this is how. Well, I want to spend more time and money on that. Now you get them into the store and you're looking at, okay, how can I, and this is a very important phrase for your listeners to hear. How do you get more people to buy more from you more often? That's the question. How do you get more people to walk in the front door? And then the next question is now they're in the store, how do you get them to put more in their shopping cart? You got to, your end caps on your aisles. You're looking at the music going on, putting peppermint smell into your store. Whatever the case may be, what do you do to get them to stay longer in the store, to put more in the shopping cart, to buy more from you? Third question, how do you get them to come back? They bought, they left. How do you get them to come back? Well, they used to come back every 3 weeks. Well, how do I get them to come back every 2 weeks now? Because if I can get them back to come back in 2 weeks, the revenue per month per customer is going to go up.
Yeah.
So if I can get that increase, I'm going to do well. So I'm looking at, okay, those three things. How do I get more in the door? How do I get them to buy more from me so I can increase my prices? I can sell more to them, offering them ancillary sales. How do I get them to buy more? How do I get them to come back? They buy from me typically 3 times a year. How do I get them to buy 4 times a year? That's the question. And if as a business owner, you're hitting those 3 key points, you're really going to address a lot of the key elements of your business. None of that's accounting. That's all on the front end. And those are numbers you have to be watching.
Yeah. Well, it's very empowering because when we're just looking at the lag indicators, it's nice to know, but it doesn't tell me much. It's more like I look at the end of the month and that revenue is there and it's great. And you're like, cool. But it doesn't mean I'm confident next month it's going to be that way. Then you look at the end, the end of the month and the sales aren't good. And you're like, crap, what did we do wrong? Right? It's not very empowering. But if we start to understand some of those lead indicators and some of those mechanisms early in the funnel, as a business owner, I feel empowered to then go and get strategic, get proactive, start making tests, try it this way, and see how they impact that lag indicator, right?
Yeah. The lagging indicators are what they are. They is what they is. That's it. They're done. The lagging says they're finished. Leading, I can work on those. I can wake up tomorrow morning and increase something on that front end. And if I can do that, I can impact the back end. And knowing what those numbers are on average, the lagging don't surprise me because I know what the leading were. So when the lagging are reported to me, I'm not surprised because I already knew what was going on. And as a business, if I'm looking at both leading and lagging, I'm doing well. The lagging are a testament to did what I worked on work. And I don't know if I said that well.
Yeah.
Did what I worked on make a difference? Because I tried to get more sales in, or I tried to increase the revenue that each customer was spending with me. My average invoice went up. Hey, that worked. We actually did something in the organization that caused people to buy more at the time of the transaction. That worked. Well, the only place I'm going to know that is the lagging indicator.
Right.
But I'm working on the leading indicator to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. It's a thing any business owner now can go and start looking at. Like, let's look at a more full picture of the business. What do we already have eyes on? And what could we get eyes on that we don't, right? Like you can only manage what you can see. If you can't see it, you can't manage it. And so spending some time getting the right professional, whether it's an accountant, consultant, somebody, or some software, anything that's going to help you get better eyes on that full picture is just going to give you more confidence at the end of the day of what to show up and work on tomorrow. That's going to impact those numbers that you really like looking at, which might be your profit or your revenue or your annual revenue or your monthly recurring revenue coming in, however your business is set up. So super well said. Man,
I've got a quote for you on this. I got a quote because you almost said it. I'm going to give you the quote. The quote is whatever you measure improves, whatever you measure, improve, and report will accelerate the improvement. So if you're measuring it, it'll improve. So if you want it to improve, you got to start tracking it. You got to write it down. It's got to be quantifiable. And only if you're measuring it will it improve. And when you start reporting it to someone else, writing it down, doing reports, then it will accelerate the improvement because you're paying attention to it. And so only the things that you measure improve, and only the things that you measure and improve and report will accelerate.
I love that. I'm going to use that. Where'd that come from?
It's the gentleman Thomas Monson said that. Thomas Monson.
Cool. I want to make sure I give proper credit if when I use that. That's awesome.
There you go.
I want to bring some attention before we end to your book, Your Strategic Accountant. Tell me a little bit about that.
I wrote that because I was working with a lot of individuals that are business owners and at the same time accounting professionals, and I was learning that neither of them really had a clear understanding of what accounting is. And I mean that, both business owners and accounting professionals. So when I had asked, what is bookkeeping? I'd go to the business owner and say, what are you paying for when you're paying a bookkeeper to do bookkeeping? And then I'd go to the accountant and I'd say, when you offer bookkeeping services, what is that you're offering? And what is it that the customer's paying for? And too often, the two did not make sense. They weren't speaking of the same service. The business owner had a different impression, understanding of what they were buying. The accountant had a different impression or understanding of what they were delivering. And so I wrote the book to try and help communicate to the business owner, when you're paying for these services, this is what you're buying and should expect as it relates to bookkeeping, accounting, tax planning, tax preparation, when it involves CFO and advisory services. Because there's a lot of people out there that are paying for tax preparation services, believing that the individual is helping them with planning strategies. You're going to help me mitigate my tax liability. That's not the case. They're just filing the return. And so to presume that they have your best interests in heart and they're going to give you tax advice on how you can mitigate your tax liability, that's not what's going on here. But yet the business owner oftentimes is paying for the tax preparation to be done, believing that individual has the best intentions of helping them pay less. No, they're just telling you what you owe and they're filing it. The tax planning person, that strategist, is the one that you're paying to give you advice on how to mitigate your tax liability, but yet the person doesn't understand they only paid for tax preparation. Same with accounting versus bookkeeping. Accounting is totally different than bookkeeping services, and to understand the distinction between the two is powerful. And the last is CFO and advisory. what is the proper role of a CFO and how does it relate to a business? And it's very important that the business owner understand what that is, because they sometimes presume the accountant is being a CFO for their organization, and it's not true. And it's the same on the accounting side. The accountant thinks they're offering CFO or accounting services. In reality, it's just bookkeeping service.
Love it, man. That sounds like a fantastic even this whole conversation. Where do I get started if I'm a business owner? Want to get a better lay of the whole conversation in my business, to check that book out. So where can they find that?
Go to universalaccounting.com. There in the navigation, it says free resources. And the free resources right at the top, ebooks. You can find the ebooks right there. Your strategic accountant is available for free. I invite you to get it, read it. It'll actually help you understand what you should be expecting from the accounting profession, what you should be paying for and getting in return.
Awesome. And then last question, if this is a business owner who's listening and wants to take advantage of the services that you all offer with your company, where do they go to get connected there?
First place you'd want to go is exactly where I just said. Go to the free resource section. You would want to go to the very bottom, and there at the end, it actually offers 2 assessments. One is that a business score. Begin there, fill out the business score, and I'd be happy to follow up with you.
Awesome. Roger, this has been fantastic. If you're listening, please take advantage of this. Like my dad said, whatever they charge, they're worth it, right? The right person in your corner is invaluable for the growth of your business. So appreciate you being on here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your perspective with us. It's been very valuable.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal.
Let's go.
Founders, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and hop into our monthly founder email so we can ensure you stay on the edge of peak performance and massive business results.